names that I recognize. And we're going to have a little chat today, keeping to the guidelines of the presentations, to discuss some of the work incentives. I'm going to give you some statistics for this year, and just so that we're all on the same page. And then I'm hoping for a lot of discussion, and I know some of you out there are prepared for this discussion, to see if in fact some of these work incentives are actually letting people test abilities to work, whether they are work incentives or are some of these things that Social Security still has in place becoming barriers to work. And the second part of that question is, what do we do about it? How can we take the information we have now with our experience and try to make some positive changes for people who are trying to work? All right, so there's all the welcome stuff. The goals of today's session, we're going to explore certain work incentives because we can't explore them all in this time. But we are looking to determine if they actually can test the ability to work and actually encourage work. We know there are some recipients who are greatly encouraged if they're receiving SSI, some not so much if they're receiving Title II. And how do these work incentives, what can we do with what we have and improve it as a means of effectively and permanently transitioning somebody from benefits dependence to financial independence through work? Ed and I have been dealing with Social Security recipients for 40 years apiece now, and we've always seen the only way out of this mishigas is through work. But some of these incentives have not necessarily given our clients a smooth journey. So we're going to look at that. So where are we today? The federal benefits rate for SSI is capped at $794 a month. The average Social Security disability payment, and this is the insurance side of things, is $1,277 a month. This year's federal poverty limit for a family of one is $1,073. Clearly, we're dealing with poor people who want to become workers and get out of poverty. Living at 72% of 792 is not a great deal. Working your entire life at coming up with $1,277 is not a great deal either. As the poverty level increases, we then put on the SSI population a resource level that stands at 1978 rates of $2,000 for an individual. Substantial gainful activity. It's very interesting that this is what Social Security uses to define work. Can you work at a substantial gainful level? It's only $1,310 a month. And in some cases, we know if an SSI recipient does that, it can be a very lucrative work experience. If a Title II recipient does that, not so much, not so much. And trial work, what we count as somebody making an effort to see if they can perform SGA on a sustained basis, uses months at $940 a month, 940 gross, well below the poverty level. Now in 2021, 1653 is the countable earnings that will exhaust that 794 federal benefit rate and end cash eligibility for SSI, retaining some other benefits that may be available to people. $653 for an SSDI recipient is a termination because you are doing substantial gainful activity and no longer need the benefits. For SSDI, work incentives are supposed to be provided by Social Security to encourage recipient work activity, actually to encourage people to work to an extent that they leave the benefits rolls. If that recipient is a Title II person and has a check for, let's say, $2,000 a month, and may have dependents that are receiving $1,000 a month, their benefits will be terminated at 13.10 and 1 cent, when in fact, in order to replace the benefits, the worker now needs to earn $3,000 a month, potentially a disincentive. That ability to test, the ability to work, which we define as SGA, is for 9 months in a 60-month period, not 9 consecutive months. They could be scattered across a 5-year period. Is that actually testing someone's ability to work? I don't know. I have an opinion, but I want to hear yours. Should the trial work period amount be increased to match the substantial gainful activity level? Should the substantial gainful activity level be raised to make a realistic wage? When we're looking at $15 an hour for a minimum wage, what does that do to people on disability benefits from either title to their work effort? And can you really test the ability to work if your 9 months are scattered across that 60-month period? Is that an effective test of your ability to sustain substantial gainful activity over time so that your benefits can in fact be terminated? SGA represents countable income, so there are lots of deductions. They are very helpful, and we know what they are. They're IRWs, impairment-related work expenses. They're subsidies. They're special conditions. There are lots of them. However, Ed and I have been training counselors to use work incentives for the last 20 years, and we have found that IRWs are very underutilized, and subsidies and special conditions are rarely on the map at all, effectively making countable income very close to gross wages.
Hey, Ray, someone just put in a question. Susan Kropak said, so what about the extended period of eligibility? And I'm happy to answer that for her. So Ray talked to you so far about, she said the trial work period. The trial work period is a 9-month period within a 60-month overall called a rolling period. And basically all you need is earnings above a very low level. In 2021, as Ray told you, it's 940. At the end of that 9th month of trial work period, a new phase begins. Ding! Extended period of eligibility that goes for 36 consecutive months. It is within those 36 consecutive months that the earnings levels are the substantial gainful activity level. That's 1310 in the year 2021. It's there where a recipient can use the 3 work incentives that Ray just mentioned: impairment-related work expenses, subsidies, and special conditions, to make what looks like earnings that are above the substantial gainful activity, causing them to get zero money during that period, to countable earnings below the substantial gainful activity, causing them to actually continue to get an SSDI check.
Yeah. And hey, Susan, how you doing? And I'm also wondering, Ed, if that explanation doesn't yet pose another barrier. Because if we have people who are trying to work at SGA to determine the ability to work and the capacity for work, is turning off their benefits because they earn $1,310 a month the right step to make, given that these people have work histories, they have insurance status, and some of them have significant benefits. The benefits can go over $3,000 this year. Here we go again, SGA is $237 above poverty. Please show me why that encourages people to go to work. I've seen recent statistics that say rents have gone up, mortgage housing expenses have gone up 50 and 60% since the minimum wage has gone up, and the minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. Where's the incentive here?
Hey, Ray, could I ask you to go back to slide number 6 for a minute?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted, if you look at that second bullet, underneath that bullet, there's a question. Is this actually a test of one's ability to work? That's the trial work period, work incentive. And I'm going to give you the example that Ray and I always give our students when we're teaching this as a course at Cornell. Let me take Ray Sabula. Ray Sabula is on disability benefits. He doesn't work at all, but Ray Sabula has two holidays that he absolutely adores. They're Christmas and Easter. Easter is in March and Christmas is in December. Because he's got a friend at the local department store, Ray Sabula is hired in March to play the Easter Bunny, and he makes earnings at the trial work period level. In December, he is hired to play Santa Claus. He makes earnings at the trial work period level. February, March, December, year 1, 2 trial work months. Year 2, 4. Year 3, 6. Year 4, 8. Year 5, he's got 9 months of trial work period earnings in 60 months. My question is, did he actually test his ability to work by playing Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny in those 2 months a year for 5 years?
Yep.
Okay.
Or does that worker does Ray need to become Baby New Year, George Washington, and a leprechaun, into March, to see whether that's a test? All right, let me go on. I'm going to move to slide 8.
There's another question.
All right, I'm trying to keep us on time here.
Oh yeah, well we're doing great. I'm keeping track of. We're doing great. Rusty says refresh his understanding as to how and when the ticket to work process kicks in, which is you go ahead and cover that.
Yeah, right now, Rusty, we're not talking about anything that requires the ticket to work to kick in. Work incentives happen. They are there in the Social Security statutes for these programs, and they pre-existed the ticket to work. The ticket to work would kick in at any time a beneficiary who's returning to work needs services that the ticket provides. That would be job supports, rehabilitation services. It could be as simple as resume writing, interview prep. Those are add-on services that the Ticket to Work Act brought to our beneficiaries when they are making the adjustment to work. But it's very, very clear that work incentives happen, whether you use your ticket or not. That is truly the one thing that is voluntary and non-necessary in a return to work.
The only reason that people have a ticket and use it is because they want to get services while they are working. But it doesn't affect basically the use of the work incentives while they are working. It's a great question.
So now, that's a very good question. Now we can look at the SSI general income scheme. This is absent impairment-related work incentives, absent blind work incentives, and anything else that we may use to deduct from gross wages of an SSI recipient. The original creation of SSI in 1974 had this formula involved. It had this formula applied to all earned income. This is the original work incentive. $20, general income exclusion. $20 has to be considered. And what was that worth in 1978? And what does it mean now? Now it doesn't even mean a movie ticket and a box of popcorn. In 1974, it was a lot of money. We use that first against unearned income because Social Security does not like unearned income. So we're going to be very, very stingy about that and use it here for unearned income. If we don't use that, and most SSI recipients don't, we're going to use that down below. We're going to subtract $60 of earned income, then use that $20 if we haven't done it. Then divide by 2. This comes out to reducing an SSI payment. But when you determine how much money the recipient actually has, it's a significant increase. It's not unlikely that somebody who's working part-time can see their monthly outcome increase to above poverty, but still remain cash eligible. That's one of the great differences between these two programs. This type of automatic exclusion of earnings does not exist in Title II. What this program allows is an SSI recipient to slowly and at their own pace and ability wean themselves from benefits. Now, when I say losing benefits, weaning themselves off of benefits, those are the goals of Social Security here. Yeah, I take a very different position on what a successful return to work looks like, and I think Ed's there with me. If somebody with a severe disability has the capacity to work 10 hours a month, and we help them work at 10 hours a month, we have a success. So I think part of what Social Security has been looking at with all of this is the successes are only determined when someone leaves the benefits rolls. Is that the right way to determine success? When on the other hand, I've created a part-time worker who is also paying taxes, becoming insured to leave a poverty program and get into an insurance program. Last slide here with the information that I think we need to discuss this stuff is the average SSDI payment is $204 above poverty. We mentioned that earlier. The maximum SSDI payment is $3,011 this year. That is going to take a lot of very high earnings, before you get to this point of $3,011. If we're looking at somebody who has to risk $2,500 in DI benefits after earning countable earnings of $1,310, is there any real incentive for that person to return to work? This is the infamous cash cliff. Once I hit $1,310.01, I lose $2,500. If my capacity is maxed out, given my disability at $1,400, why would I return to work if I'm going to lose $2,500?
Or more, Ray, what if they have dependents? Then they're getting $2,500 for themselves and $1,200 for their auxiliaries. And we're talking about $3,700.
Yeah.
And losing it when you earn above $1,310 after the grace period.
All right, so we are right on time, Ed.
Oh, yeah. and Stacy Cloyd, our friend from NOSCR, Stacy, welcome, has a series of questions that are right on point here.
All right, well, let me go into I've got to move us to question and answers, and I am going to leave this slide up, but remind me to not stop sharing my slide. Oh, I'm going to stop sharing, right? Because we're supposed to stop sharing now so we can see people. There we are.
Great. So, like I said, Stacy's got a great series of questions. So I'm going to cover them one at a time. First one is, in our experience, is it easier to explain an offset like SSIs, a cliff like SSDI, or brackets, like if earnings below one level had X reduction and earnings below another level had a Y reduction? So let me just tell you, I'm going to answer this and let Ray answer it. And then anybody here who's got experience, we would welcome your comments also. But I will tell you right now that it is infinitely easier to explain to someone on SSI what happens with their benefit. Because they'll say to you, I'm going to be earning $485 a month, Ed. And I say, oh, do you have any other unearned income? No, I don't, Ed. Okay, well, 485, take away 20, 465. 465 for earned income, take away 65, 400. We divide that by 200. Your SSI is going to go down by $200, but you're going to have an extra 285 to live on. Just by giving them an exact science, going right down a calculation sheet. That's easy. They'll go, oh, I understand this. Now you talk to someone on SSDI and they say, well, I want to earn, same thing, 485. you can easily say, no problem. You can earn 485 for the rest of your life and keep getting benefits. Then they go, but what if I earn $1,000 a month? Then you go, well, now you begin to use up something called the trial work period. So if you have steady income, let's say, Ray, for 9 consecutive months, you use up your trial work period. And then what happens? Well, if your earnings stay at that, no problem. But if the earnings go up above a certain other level, and they're like, what are you talking about? Why are they doing this? I mean, why does this have to be so complex? That's what our clients tell us.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. And I'm getting $2,000 a month. Why would I possibly risk, and people have said that to us, risk my benefits? This doesn't make sense, this program. They want me to work, but why should I work?
Yeah, I think, Ed, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. And Stacy is, yeah, I mean, Stacy, I just was reading the legislative proposals that Social Security may be making from their annual budget, and they're looking at doing something like that.
Mhm.
You know, for Title II people, if you are earning $1,000 a month, we'll deduct $1. You know, if they're earning a little bit more, maybe $2, and that could be extended out through several brackets. I think that would be more of a work incentive. It remains to be seen if that makes it more understandable.
Right. That's a great point, Ray. And Stacy, I've got to tell you, so I have testified 3 times in the Senate since 2000 and before 2000. Back when Moynihan was the head of the Social Security Committee, and then when Bunning was, and then one other time. And so on all 3 occasions, I explained to them that if I was the person in charge of coming up with a work incentive for a person who's on Social Security disability insurance, I would do away with absolutely every work incentive in the Title II program. There'd be no trial work period. There'd be no extended period of eligibility. There'd be no grace period. Okay, there'd be no substantial gainful activity, that becomes a cliff. There'd be no trial work period level. I would say, what's the substantial gainful activity for this year? Oh, 2021, $1,310. And I'd say, if you earn up to $1,310 in the year 2021, you get your full check each and every month. Now, if you go over that $13.10, for every $2 you go over, we treat it like SSI. We reduce your check by $1. That allows them to actually wean themselves off the benefits. Someone who's making getting $2,500 in Title II, think about it, is going to continue trying to increase their earnings because they keep their SSDI, they keep their Medicare payment, and they can actually decrease the amount that they get from SSDI slowly. They can actually test their ability to work, as opposed to doing what Stacy so aptly put, parking themselves at the cliff at that 1310 level.
Yeah, and we've got old right now, but customer satisfaction surveys that Social Security did, and they were done in 2004, and Social Security has requested that they be done again, and of course there's no money. But they've determined that part-time work is a good start. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I think goes along with what Ed's saying. Part-time work is a good start because somebody with a severe disability is not going to be able to go back to the job that they had and work 40 hours a week to start. That's not likely to happen. If we can get all of the accommodations and all of the extra services that Rusty's throwing in here to the mix, we will then be able to support a worker for a while. But I don't think at full time, it's not going to happen right away. So the incrementalness of what Stacy's suggesting and the incrementalness of what Ed is suggesting to support that worker, make a transition to work that can be sustained and allow benefits to be terminated, seems to me to be the way to go. Stacy also asked about people's fear of getting an overpayment. Stacy, we don't train people to tell their clients, there might be an overpayment. We train our benefits planners to tell their clients that there will be an overpayment. Yeah, and we can potentially do something about that so that they're not shocked, because Ed and I have both lived through the days when an overpayment simply stopped a work effort. Yeah, and it's certainly not a work incentive. I think what we need to do is go one step beyond that and determine, why are these overpayments happening? If somebody's been reporting work for a year, why haven't the benefits been reduced? Why haven't the benefits been suspended? We all know why. And the reason is returning to work for Social Security is not a priority. Regardless of what they say, it is not a priority. It's workload that they don't get credit for and they put in the pile. And if somebody requests a benefits query, a BPQY, and they see that, oh, this medical CDR was supposed to happen 2 years ago, that gets their attention. It's not the people who are reporting work. So I think we need a significant culture change within the agency. If we're going to have work incentives, let's make them mean something. If we're going to have work incentives and somebody wants to try to leave the benefits role, or if you're on SSI, to work enough to become qualified for the insurance program and retirement, let people do that. But if you're going to throw an overpayment at them, and these aren't $5,000 overpayments that Ed and I saw, these are 20, 30. I've seen one as high as $169,000. What kind of welcome to the workforce is that? So I think that we need to get a culture change that says work is as much a priority to help people get off of benefits as it is a priority to take applications to get them on.
Hey, Ray, there's another excellent question here from Jeffrey Hammeter. He says, didn't SSA test an offset and find no effect on earnings? And aren't they testing another one today now?
They are. They had the bonds, the pods, the bond 2, the pod 2, and all of these have done what Stacy suggested, make it more incremental. They didn't see no effect on earnings.
Correct.
Earnings actually increased.
Right.
What they found was that they weren't saving any money, because they want people to go to work and do it the old-fashioned way and just lose benefits. When in fact, if we take Ed, who's a perfectly healthy attorney and can work 60 hours a week and break his back, it's going to take a long time for him to get back in that chair and be able to work another 60-hour week. It just is. So I think that some of those other programs, the early iterations of those programs also saw Social Security refusing any information about what was going to happen when the pilot program was over.
Ended, right.
The result being that those people fell back into the regular pot, and many were automatically terminated. And no one was allowed to tell people that were going to be impacted by the pilot that was going to happen in 3 years. So I think we need some honest pilot projects. That's what I think. And we will see, if we did an increment like Ed explained and like Stacy is suggesting, and did it honestly and encouraged people and made it a welcoming status change, then by all means, I think we would see increases in income.
Yeah, Ray, let me just jump in for a minute. Jeffrey, you say, didn't they test and find no effect on earnings? So let me tell you, with the first one, we were involved in it. Cornell had actually gotten a grant from the Social Security Administration when they created the BPA and DOE, which was the Benefits Planning and Assistance and Outreach Program. And so the whole idea was they were going to put work incentive practitioners into the country in order to provide benefits planning services to these clients. They tested these programs. And here's the problem with how they judged the test. Because Ray said, they were looking at something else. They were. When Congress first looked at this program, they said right now, 0.5% of all the people who actually go to work eventually get off the benefit rolls. And so they said, we will consider this program a success if we can double that number that get off the rolls.
Yeah.
Okay, now remember the facts that we started with. If you've got someone making $2,500, that's what they get in SSDI benefits. How are they going to be a success story? Oh, they've got to earn about, in 2021, $1,350 after a certain period of time. And they're actually not better off. They're never going to do that. They can't do that. They can't possibly be a success story because of the way the program is set up. So number one, the program is not set up properly. And number two, the way that they judge success is actually not practical, rational, or reasonable.
Yeah, and I think, Jeffrey, we also have to consider how Social Security counts earnings increases. They are doing just what Ed said. If your earnings are not increasing to the extent that you lose your benefits, you're not a success story. You're not counted. And that's what Congress sees all the time. We see 0.5% leaving the rolls. Again, I'm going to throw out there that how many of our clients, given that they now have a severe disability, are able to do that? But how many of our clients are working part-time to supplement those benefits so that they can live the way they used to live, or in the SSI world, to live outside of poverty? If those people were counted as taxpayers, if those people were counted as people who spend their earnings in their communities, then we'd see a whole different notion of what success is.
And Ray, taking it one step further, how many of those people are actually parking themselves at the cliff, $1,300 in earnings, because they know that if they earn above that and they lose their benefits, they cannot provide for their family members?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the bottom line. The bottom line in both of these programs, because $2,500 is an extremely high benefit. But if you look at the average, the bottom line is you got to feed the kids. You got to keep a roof over your head. And we're barely allowing disabled and poor people with disabilities to even get into a housing situation.
That's right. So Ray, before we move on to bring up our discussion questions, and I'll just say them so we don't have to go back to the slides, because I like being able to see everybody and to encourage people to talk. Are there any other questions before Ray and I start raising a couple of the discussion points that we'd love to hear from you about? Any questions?
Yeah, so far this has been going pretty well. I'm willing to just let this go.
Great. So here's the question that we have for you for discussion. Number one, how can SSA make using work incentives a true encouragement to work for every recipient? If you guys were in charge, okay, what would you say to Social Security that they could do to make using work incentives a true encouragement to work for every recipient? What do you guys say about that? Any ideas? Any ideas whatsoever? We're going to give you a little bit of time to, of course, jot them down in the chat box. And along with that one, there's the second question that goes hand in hand with it. Given the extraordinary benefits of work incentives available to the SSI recipient, since it's an exact formula, what barriers exist to providing equivalent incentives to the SSDI recipient? So those are two questions. And Devin, I think, if folks wanted to talk as opposed to write, I think, the group is small enough they could probably do that. If you guys want to raise your hand, and Devin will open up your mic. Anybody? How about Stacy from NOSCA?
Yeah, Stacy, come on in here. I
okay.
know this,
yeah. I mean, I agree with what both of you said about overpayments being a work disincentive. I think that SSA, considering ways to make those overpayments less frequent and process them better when they do happen would be useful. I think that we've seen a lot of problems with expedited reinstatement when people go to work and then their income decreases. And I think processing those should be a priority for SSA, even during the pandemic. I agree that I think that the 2-for-1 or similar offset is easier to explain when I've tried to explain it to beneficiaries. With that said, I think starting an offset above SGA would be fantastic. Whether that's going to be where people want to spend money, I don't know. But I agree that that seems like a real gold standard and something that would be very understandable to beneficiaries compared to some of the current options. And I think that in SSI, the earned income and unearned income disregards just need to be massively increased and adjusted for inflation. So a few thoughts.
All really, really, really good ideas.
Really good.
And by the way, Susan wrote up in here that at one time she thought, and you are correct, Susan, that SSA funded program navigators to help people understand work incentives. I think a more modest program still exists, but it isn't as robust as the old navigator program. And Susan, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And I'm going to tell you that I think that program was really good, but it was basically begging the question. Because what Social Security wants people to say to the clients in front of them is, well, you should go ahead and get yourself enough earnings to go off the benefits rolls. But if that happens, like we've been saying, they might not have enough money to feed their family because they're going to be bringing less money in. And so yes, you provide that service, but you haven't really changed anything. And so it's not going to make that big an impact if you don't change the overall structure of how income is treated. That's my position. So
I think I agree with everything Stacy said as well. And I think is that where people want to spend money is always the question. And when you think of this, we look at budgets and how we build programs on a year-to-year basis. We want a program to produce a significant increase or decrease in money in a year. We're not looking at anything that is going to allow our clients to do that. Giving them a trial work period for 9 months, easing someone from SSI into work if they can get to full-time. I think that the issue isn't one of money. The issue is that we will save money, but we're not going to save it for potentially 4 years, given the nature of the beast. The beast tells us these people have severe disabilities. The beast tells us some of them were workers before and some of them weren't. What do we expect? We can't expect people to open the door and say, I want a job and I'm going to go work full time to make this magical budget process make sense. But the future investment is, I believe, astounding. And yes, it's going to cost more money to leave benefits on the table for some of these people who are gradually making their return to work. But we are going to take that off the table in the future and more likely be able to leave it off the table and have a person who may have been in the poverty program insured for both DI, which is pretty self-supporting, or it's supposed to be, and for retirement.
Absolutely. Hey, Ray, there's some great points being made. And
please.
The first one is I want to take them out of order a little bit to keep us focused. Kate says, I think there are limits on changes that SSA can make. Many of these ideas require congressional action.
Absolutely.
Which is why they have these congressional hearings, of which I've gone to 3 times. Every time they say, oh, Mr. Lopez Soto, those are some wonderful ideas. And then basically as I'm walking out the door, it's like someone says, and don't let the door slam your butt as you walk out, because the minute I leave, their response is too much money. How are we going to save money here? What's it going to show for this year? And so they're not thinking about 3 or 4 years down the road. They're thinking about this year. And that's tough, but you're absolutely right, Kate. That's an issue. Now Bethany has some great points, Devin. And if Bethany is able to access her mic, I would love for her to make those points out loud to the whole group, because she could really elucidate on this issue.
Well,
Bethany?
I think, sure. It's nice to meet everybody who I don't already know, which I think is at least Susan and Stacy and Kate. The point I was making in the chat is kind of to the point of saving money. I mean, the point of this is not, to my mind, to save money. The point of this is to ensure that, you know, the folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities that I represent have, you know, 10 hours of work a week or 5 hours of work a week, because that matters to them. It matters a good deal. I mean, our receptionist only works, you know, half days, and he can't manage much more than that, but it's very important for him to be able to come into the office. And you know, having worked at the Bazelon Center, where we worked with people with serious mental illness, there are similar issues there where folks, you know, can work on and off, but they really find value in employment. I mean, I find a lot of value in my own employment, so I completely understand where it comes from. And so I think if we can shift that question, this isn't about saving money. We're not going to suddenly see a collection of people leaving the programs, because by definition, these are folks with incredibly serious disabilities, with a lot of work function issues. But if we can make their lives better, if we can ensure that they have access to the work if they want it, and if, you know, they can earn a little bit of money. I mean, I feel like I'm just echoing what you two have been saying this whole presentation, but I really,
but it means
want to reiterate that.
It's the truth, Bethany. It really is. You know, I think, you know, we need to get, I don't know how to do it. Stacy has much more of a sense of, you know, the lobbying and what's going on in Washington than I do, because I am living my pre-retirement dream in Santa Fe, you know. You know? But, you know, when we talk about the people that we're serving, you know, they want to work, you know, they find value, and we need to change maybe society's whole view on what work means. You know, I believe that every job out there has dignity, and everybody who is working to their greatest extent should be very proud of their efforts. And now those people have choice. They can choose on Friday night to go to the movies. They couldn't do that before. You know, and so I think that work is going, I mean, I just watched the news this morning, and I have 3 dogs, so I'm up really, really early. And I'm watching the news, and part of the story that I was watching was what's happening to people in the pandemic. A significant increase in alcohol addiction and substance addiction. If that's what we as a country decide to do with poor people and marginalized populations, is let them get drunk and let them get high so they won't argue and stand up for themselves, that's one option. I think that's the wrong option. You know, that we should be encouraging everybody to work to their maximum extent so that choice is allowed, so that exits from poverty are allowed, and these programs need to adjust to that.
Absolutely. And Ray, and thank you, Bethany, by the way. And the reason I wanted you to speak to the whole group is because you actually are working with those clients, and it's not just theory. So I always think that if we're going to be testifying before Congress, and we're going to be saying to them, we want change, we need the people to talk about the big picture, and then the people to talk about the specifics. But then we also need the people that come in and say, and by the way, here's how my clients and where they are in the work continuum, and why they're a success anyway, and why they could not meet your definition of success ever, because that's not where they are in their life.
Yeah.
And so, it's really important that, especially if Stacy can get us and get the Biden administration to start looking at these issues and get the Senate to have more hearings, to have a whole panoply of us testify, so that they hear it, because often they only want to hear the theory, but then what gets lost is how it affects people's lives.
Yep.
So,
And I think, yeah, and along with that, to enhance that a little bit further, is we have to change the way Social Security thinks about their customers, not their recipients, not their beneficiaries, their customers. I remember years ago practicing in Brockton, Massachusetts, one of the poorest cities in Massachusetts, going into Social Security, an elderly couple standing in front of me as I was waiting in line to see a client's file, and they held up a very shaky overpayment notice. And the first question out of the service rep's mouth was, "How do you want to pay that back?" And then I was a little bit more obnoxious than I am now. And I said, "Sir, here's my business card. I provide free services to folks in your situation. Don't do anything until this woman reads you all of your rights." And how is a worker who gets an overpayment being encouraged to do anything? Why do Ed and I sit with people who want to go to work, and when we tell them they have to report to their claims rep how much they're earning every month, they cry because that woman yells at me every time. Why did my dean go in to apply for Part A? She talked to me. I told her what was going to happen and why she was doing that. And as soon as she brought up a question, she was told by Social Security, "Stop this interview right now. We're going to reschedule it." And her response was to come back and call me and say, "Is this what you've been dealing with your entire life?" And I said, "Well, usually it's a little bit worse than that." How is this a friendly agency? How is this a friendly agency who is taking the most vulnerable populations and pretty much leaving them unable to do business with one of the biggest administrations in the world?
Absolutely. And we have one other comment here. Susan Prokop, would you can we unmute her and have her explain it, because I think it's right on point.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi. Thanks for this session. This has just struck me because Paralyzed Veterans of America we finished our legislative conference yesterday, and one of the sessions was on Social Security and the disability insurance program, and several of our members in attendance chimed in with that SSDI is important to them, and that they would like to go back to work, and yet they feel like they can only work part-time because their spinal cord injury requires them, they can't work full-time because they have severe SCI. And they don't, and they have heard about the penalties that exist in SSDI about earnings reports and going above SGA. And we also heard similar refrains from our vocational rehabilitation program director, who said a lot of the veteran clients that she works with also that many of them don't know about the Social Security work incentives. They've never heard of Ticket to Work. And then if they have this visceral reluctance to try to work because of the punishment, the overpayments, et cetera, that they fear they will face if they attempt it. And they too would like to try work at a part-time level. And so it's a real thing for a whole range of people with disabilities. And also it's been 20 years since the Ticket to Work and Work Incentives Improvement Act passed. Isn't it about time for an overhaul?
A total overhaul. So Susan, if you've heard these clients talk, you're in the system here, what would you recommend be done a little differently?
Well, I agree with my colleagues Stacy and Bethany about looking at the whole phasing out of Title SSDI as earned income grows. So that's been something PVA has supported for a long, long time. We also think that getting the information to clients who want to work. That's why I asked about the navigators, that our voc rehab folks try to explain the waterfront of work incentives to our clients, but we can only work with a few clients at a time, whereas there are many more people on SSDI who could benefit from that information.
Good point. Good point.
All right. Well, we're over time already, so I'm gonna cut us short and thank Devin, thank Ed, and thank all of you. I think we did manage to have a robust conversation, and I agree with everything everybody said, you know, and I think that what we need to do is somehow make progress with not only reforming the work incentives so our clients can find them attractive, but with reforming an agency that doesn't see any of them as attractive or a priority. And, you know, I would encourage folks to participate where they can. And it's frankly time, I think, that our government hears the truth about what Social Security is doing to people and how they're treating people. And maybe make a sea change with that only. So Devin,